We are building an LGB garden railway from scratch, starting with a starter pack with a circle of tracks all the way to a dream layout. It all started with a starter pack featuring a circle, and now there is a proper garden railway, fully digitalized, with 2 exceptional digital locomotives, and all conceivable accessories have also been digitalized by now. We have digitally controlled the signals, we can switch the turnouts digitally, and we have meticulously built contact tracks. Instead of the old analog controller, we now utilize the digital central unit, the Central Station 3 from Marklin, which can also be used for LGB systems. And in the last episode, I demonstrated how to construct contact tracks, how to accurately recognize, for example, that a locomotive has driven over a certain part of the layout, a so-called feedback module. And now that we have prepared and built this, we can now program an event control in the CS3 so that one can then really drive the train automatically. What is the principle supposed to be now on this system? We have both locomotives standing here at the station with a red signal, and I want one locomotive to leave the station. Makes its round, then re-enters the free track, comes to a complete stop at red, while the other locomotive receives the green signal, drives out of the station once again, and then re-enters the free track. That's one way to do it. To do this, we need to do the following. We must be able to control the signals. We indeed need to be able to switch the turnout at the back digitally, and we also need 3 contact tracks. A contact track on track 1, a contact track on track 2, and a third contact track here behind me in the curve, so essentially behind the 2 signals and located behind the switch. This contact track is supposed to switch both signals to red, just like here, now. Moreover, we must prepare to interrupt the rails, because these signals cannot merely move their wings by switching them digitally, but interestingly, we can also switch a currentless section right here. It means that when the signal is red, as it is here, there is also no current flowing on the respective rail. When the signal turns green again, the circuit is closed again, and the locomotive can continue, regardless of what gear is engaged in the CS3. So if the locomotive is moving, it will still stop here, because there is no current flowing through this rail when the signal is red. We will just simulate that now, or rather, I will now actually program the whole thing as a comprehensive event in CS3. Signals are now connected digitally, switches are fully digitized, and the contact tracks are also completely finished being built. Let's take a look at it. This signal is now turning green. So now the signal is green, and now electricity would flow, and if I start my gaze locomotive now, then it can also start moving. She is now driving over the contact track here behind me, and as soon as she arrives in the curve, this signal will automatically switch to red. That must have indeed happened just about now. So now the switch is also being thrown at the back, or rather not now, but only slightly later. The switch is now set to through, or rather it was not yet. I'm going to switch it over now, because the contact track that is here on track 1, that will switch the turnout. So, the signal is red. Our train is now entering the station. The circuit is actually now readied here to the extent that the locomotive will simply stop here at red as soon as it has reached the area. So, this is the case now. And now, the switch at the back turns to round, and our second locomotive turns green after just a few moments, and can then begin driving accordingly here. The whole thing is quite frankly still built a bit tight. I need to widen that area immediately so the locomotive can pass. Now, it's about programming in this video, what's happening on the CS3. And we'll take a look at that right now on the display of the CS3. This is what it looks like in the CS3. I can actually go into the event control here, and I can now create a brand new event right here. That means first of all track 1, and I can now, for example, just rename that and simply call it track at best. So here pay attention to uppercase and lowercase letters. I will call it track 1, because that is the event control for the route track 1. So now, I can pull the first feedback decoder out of the track diagram, in this particular case K2, because I want that when the feedback decoder passes over K2, that is on track 2, something significant happens on track 1, specifically that the signal on track 1 turns green, so that the locomotive on track 1 can start moving. So, this is now just the first witch deck, and this is actually already the first task. So now, the locomotive that goes over in K2 can easily switch the signal, which is here on track 1, to green. Moreover, I still need to activate the switch because yes, it should be flipped. That's already true. But I could also change that in theory. I could also click on the switch and set it to round, but right now it's already correct here. Now I can close the whole thing because my route track 1 is finished. Now I need that for the other track. I also have to set up route 2 here, and so route 2 will inevitably become my track 2, without any doubt whatsoever. So here again to make capitalization correct. 2. Very good. And here, the same game unfolds. I am now pulling the signal from the feedback unit K1 in here. So when the locomotive is supposed to drive over feedback unit 1, it should indeed be triggered, transitioning to yellow, then something should happen, and in this particular case, the signal will switch and it will turn green. So, the locomotive that is entering track 1 gives the green light to the locomotive on track 2, and the switch must now also be switched, because the track here is now free, so the next locomotive should also enter here on track 2. So, then we can close this as well. And now we need a third event, that is to transition both signals to red simultaneously. And that's when the locomotive, so to speak, goes around the curve, and we'll just call that simply an exit from the station now. That essentially concerns both locomotives. Then it basically doesn't matter which of the two locomotives leaves the station. Therefore, this feedback device K3 is also behind the switch, behind all signals, and we have to pull that one in right away. So now we're just going to put the signals in briefly. Signal turns to red. The other signal should also turn red. Signal turns to red. So now we have to pull the feedback unit K3 in here. Yes, and that was all the programming we needed here. Now trains come in like this. We can test it by pressing the feedback devices with our hand. Whether that is triggered. We could also briefly test the events here by hand again to see if they are correct. But that actually all looks good. And now we just have to place the locomotives and the signals on the layout just as it is here in the track diagram. And then we can take our very first test drive with it. This is the automatic control on an LGB Garden Railway with the Central Station 3, featuring digitally controlled signals and digitally controlled switches, along with two beautiful digital locomotives. Everything you need to rebuild I've also put in the description text under this video. Have fun rebuilding.